This is Pixelated Audio, episode 51, and today we've got another amazing soundtrack from the Famicom Disk System. Welcome to Pixelated Audio, a bi-weekly podcast featuring video game music and retro gaming. Hosting today's show is myself, James, and Brian.
How's it going, guys? Today we're going to be listening to the music from Falsion, and Falsion is a third-person perspective space shooter developed and published by Konami in 1987 for the Famicom Disk System.
To give you a little bit of an idea of what this looks like, it's a little bit like Sega's Space Harrier.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. And it's been quite a while since we did a Famicom Disk System exclusive episode, so almost a year.
Yeah, right? It was way back in episode 24. I mean, you had said almost a year, and I was like, no, that can't be right. And I scrolled all the way back through, and I mean, this is episode 51. That was 24, so I mean, that was quite a while ago.
And that was on Ai Senshi Nicol, which is a fantastic game that you should go back and play if you have the means to play it, which everybody has the means to play it, I think.
Yeah.
Excellent game, excellent soundtrack, and it's all because of the Famicom Disk System attachment. And this game is no different in that sense.
Well, and another thing that they share is it was also a Konami game.
Very true, very true. We should have picked something else, man. You want to switch it up now?
No.
Anyways, no, the soundtrack for Falsion is amazing. You guys are going to hear a lot of good music. You already heard that first track, and we got a lot more stuff to go. I mean, it's a short soundtrack. It's a short game, so I mean, it's a difficult game, so you're going to be playing it over and over and over, but it's got a really powerful score behind it.
Yeah. So anyways, to get the episode rolling, the first track that we played was called The First Space Flight, which takes place during level 1.
I think this track is super energetic and just really pumps up the whole game. You don't really hear a lot of music. You don't hear any music really when you start it. And so this is the first thing you're going to hear, the first thing to get your blood flowing and, you know, your eyes cross-eyed when you start looking at the screen.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you turn this game on, it just goes straight to playing, and this track just blows you away right away. Like you said, very fast-paced. It's very Konami. To me, it sounded very Konami. There's a lot of sounds that I kind of recognized from other games.
Yeah, they're like recycled. You know?
Yeah, but it's not really bad, though. I think that they have a good sound, and they use it really well, so there's not, you know, like, as long as the songs don't sound exactly like another game, which they don't, and it's just gives a good sound, because it kind of brings in some of that emotion for other games. Like, there was some Ninja Turtle sounds that I kind of got from this, and it just kind of made it even more fun to play. Right.
For me, I really like the harmonizing square waves. I think that slight delay, creating that echo effect with the square wave too, is just, it's so pretty, and Konami's so well known for being able to have these really powerful punching harmonizing lead channels, and I think it's so awesome about this track, and you're going to hear a lot of that in the rest of the soundtrack as well.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with the Ai Senshi Nicol episode, you're going to know that we're going to be talking about that Famicom Disk System add-on that just, it takes those really great, 8-bit sounding tracks and just gives them an extra little punch of adrenaline to make sounds even more crisp, or put emphasis on things. Or like in this track, it had the kind of like guitar slide sounds to it. I was just like, wow, that is just so cool.
Yeah, that's like a sweep, and they don't overdo it, which is nice. They really only kind of add it in at certain points, but your ear will pick that up right away, and I'm sure you guys heard plenty of that as this last track was playing. And it's just really cool to hear that like slide up, which you don't really get to hear too much on the NES APU by itself.
Yeah, we're really excited about this music, so maybe we should start with the composers responsible for the soundtrack. So first up, we have Shinya Sakamoto, aka Rusher Sakamoto, or S. Sakamoto as he's also credited by. He's a Japanese composer that worked at Konami from the mid-'80s all the way up until the late '90s, although most of his career composing was around the NES era.
Right.
So for the NES, we have Life Force, King Kong 2 Megaton Punch, YY World, which those last two games we played tracks from in our expansion packs. We also have Stinger on the NES. And then for the Famicom Disk System and the NES, he did both versions of Demon Castle Legend 2. Also on the Famicom Disk System, we have Green Beret, Final Command, Red Base, Blades of Steel.
Well, he did the music for the original Konami Ice Hockey for the Famicom Disk System, so I'm not exactly sure if he did the same music that was ported over to the NES for Blades of Steel.
It might have just been sound engineering.
Possibly.
Anyway, for the Famicom Disk System, we also have Risei no Yosei Densetsu, and then Nemesis on the Game Boy.
He also helped work on music and sound production for Circus Charlie in the arcade. Not exactly 100% sure what his role in that was, but he does have a credit for that. Esper Dream on the Famicom Disk System, Ajax and Quarth on the Sharp X68000, and that's according to VGMPF, but I couldn't find that anywhere else. None of my other resources mentioned that at all, so take it as it is, I guess.
Yeah, we run into a lot of that with researching stuff. You go to 5 different sites and you get 5 different answers.
Yeah.
So.
Anyways, another person responsible for the soundtrack is Atsushi Fujio, a.k.a. Mount Fujio.
Oh, I like that.
Damien Fujio and Sukenomiya Fujio. And I know those last two ones. I've seen those credited before, but I didn't know the Mount Fujio one. That's kind of funny. I want to say he's probably the main composer for the soundtrack, and he also did a lot of the audio programming for the game. And you've probably seen him like on a good portion of games or Konami games that came out in the mid to late 80s. But a lot of the time he's more responsible for the audio engineering side, the programming side. And when he does do some composition work, it's usually because he's already doing engineering for that game.
Right.
So he might contribute like a track or so.
Yeah, and so in his list of games for the NES, he has Salamander, or Life Force as it's known here, Demon Castle Legend 2, YY World, Adventures of Bayou Billy, Gonbare Pennant Race, Twin Bee 3, Madara, Dream Penguin Story, Laser Invasion, and Roller Games. And for the Famicom Disk System, we have Exciting Billiards, Exciting Soccer Konami Cup, Biomiracle Bukute Upa, Final Command Red Fortress, Blades of Steel, Risei no Yosei Densetsu, and for the Famicom Disk System and NES, he has Gyrus.
So on the non-composing side, more like audio engineering side, he's helped with Axelay for the Super Nintendo. He did the sound programming there. He did the sound programming and sound effects for Contra Spirits. Madara 2, he did the sound programming and sound effects. Also, he did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, all the sound programming for that for the Genesis, and also Vampire Killer. He did all the sound programming for that on the Genesis. And there's also a few other games like Survival Kids Island Adventures. He did the composing and the sound effects for the Game Boy Color. He's got, we just read a ton of different things that he's done, and I'm sure there's a few other things that he was just never credited for, but the guy has an amazing repertoire of composition and audio work, you know?
Yeah, no, we had talked about these lists are a little bit long, but some of these games are just you can't really leave them off the list.
And there's one other person that's responsible for some of the soundtrack, and for the longest time, people assumed that it was Yuji Takenouchi, and he had done the soundtrack for the game. And a lot of people started asking him after he left Konami, did you work on the Falsion soundtrack or not? And so he says that it wasn't actually him. It was Shigehiro Takenouchi, who had already quit by the time that he joined. So when he joined and the original Takenouchi left, people just assumed it was the same person, so it was credited as Yuji Takenouchi. Anyways, he's done a few different tracks. Not a lot of music for Konami. He must have been there only for a few years. But he did work on Nemesis 2 for the MSX, Metal Gear for the MSX and NES. I'm unsure of what his role is on those games. It might have been sound effects. But let's get into our next track. This is called The Evening Voyage, and it's from Level 2.
heard the Evening Voyage Level 2 for Falsion on the Famicom Disk System.
It's such a great track. That's probably my second favorite track, actually.
Yeah.
No, it is. It really is. Like there's another one on here that I deem my top favorite all-time track of this soundtrack, but this one is definitely up there.
I didn't know if you meant this is your second favorite track of the 2 tracks that we've played.
No. I do really, really like this track though, and it has so much energy, and it's so hard to get to this level anyway. And when you start listening, it pumps you up, and that really beautiful kind of like dancing around the piano, very Konami sounding to me.
Yeah.
The high brass of the Famicom Disk System just makes me so happy.
Yeah. No, I mean, this game has a great melody to a lot of the songs, which, I mean, it's very Konami. But, I mean, I guess it's really very, like, 80s 8-bit music. It had, a lot of the really good music had really good, strong melodies. And I really like in this track how there's kind of like a trading off. The song's kind of sectioned off where a lot of the similar sounds are working together, and then they kind of almost like turn off, and then a new set of sounds will come in for a second. And
it's like your A-B parts.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's like lined up differently, yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of neat to have, like, instead of them all kind of mixing together, that they were kind of very segmented in this one, which I kind of liked. But, I mean, it had the very galloping, heroic.
Very dancey.
Yeah, like fast pace, kind of like getting you pumped up. And for a shooter, I mean, it works really great.
Yeah, we've talked about the Famicom Disk System and the Ricoh 2C33 chip before, quite a few times now, actually.
Right.
We were just talking about like Ai Senshi Nicol episode that we did, episode 24. But to give you a little recap about the disk system attachment in terms of audio, is that it complements the existing 5-channel NES sound system by adding basically a single 64-step wavetable channel, and you can use like a modulation table, or the engineers can use a modulation table set up by the CPU. It's a really intricate little system, and this addition can simulate a bunch of different instruments. So we get these really high brassy, tenor saxophone sounds or trumpet sounds, or it can sound like almost like an electric guitar, which you don't really get on the NES too much. And I think that it sounds so pretty. And this track itself has a really cool use of the Famicom Disk System attachment. Let's just listen to that real quick by itself, because it just sounds so cool. Hang on.
No, I love when we do this.
Yeah. You can really hear that it's really the bulk behind what makes this track so cool, right?
Yeah, it's definitely carrying a lot of weight, whereas sometimes you'll see it as more like a subtle kind of addition, and it'll bring add more fullness to some of the tracks or something like that. But this one is really carrying a heavy load.
I think it's interesting too that it goes so high in the high range, and then it drops down to do like that bass, that da 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 da. Anyways, I do love this track though. It's a lot of fun to listen to. The whole soundtrack is good. And this is obviously one of my favorites, so moving on.
So the story for this game is actually only explained in the game manual, and it's kind of brief, but it's a neat little story. So basically,
it's actually a lot more detailed than I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a paragraph long, so for an entire game. But so basically, in this world, humans have colonized all the planets in our galaxy, and they've decided they wanted to start expanding into other galaxies, like human tendencies. So they develop a new technology called the hyperzone drive, but as it turns out, a hostile alien race has already mastered this and has been spreading throughout other galaxies, kind of taking them over.
Right.
Eventually they reach our Pluto colony and instantly just wipe it out. Like, they have very limited resources, they have very limited abilities to defend themselves, and this advanced technology just kind of took everybody out.
Wiped us out.
Yeah, so I mean, Pluto, that's sorry. So the people that kind of police this galaxy, they're called the United Space Force.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most creative name, but it sounds like a military
I guess
group.
that is what they would call it. We don't always have the most clever names for these special forces, but...
So they decide that they want to retaliate, and they kind of throw caution to the wind and decide to use this untested hyperzone drive to launch an attack on the aliens. So unfortunately, all the ships that they send are destroyed except for one, which is the protagonist of this game, and their ship happens to be called Falsion. So that's where the game gets its name.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it because I didn't read that actually. I had no idea. I was just waiting for you to explain it to me.
Yeah, because I mean, like we said before, as soon as you hit start, it just jumps into shooting and music right away.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I played the game like a lot, but you actually read up on the story. I probably should have done that.
There's not one cutscene, one blurb of text, anything before you start playing.
Yeah, so like a lot of other shooters, I mean, this is a shooter. So like a lot of other shooters, you're just trying to dodge stuff, different obstacles, different enemies, while you're scrolling through this level to get to the end boss. The difference is, though, with this and like a vertical shooter is that it has this third-person perspective view that we were talking about earlier, where your ship's moving forward, and it's not mode 7 because that technology didn't exist, but it's like the sprites are programmed to like move in a way that makes it appear. Do you remember Windows 95 where it had that like Starfield simulation screensaver?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah, like the sprites basically just get bigger and come at you, but it's not like very smooth.
Really messes up your depth perception.
Yeah, I mean, you get like 5 like sprites for like an asteroid growing towards you, so there's like a section where it's like where is it, and it's like right up on you.
But yeah, it is kind of like Sega Space Harrier or Afterburner or something like that. It's just not as pretty as those games are. But you have to complete 6 levels, and in order to do this, you have infinite ammo, which is totally fine, but you have limited number of homing missiles. I didn't actually use those much, and you were actually the one that told me, like, hey, why aren't you using your missiles?
Yeah, I knew that they were there because of doing a little bit of the research, but yeah, I kind of forgot about them too.
Yeah, and so enemies are like randomly appearing all over the place, and at the same time you're getting these power-ups that appear on the screen, and those are random as well. I was trying to watch you play and kind of see like, okay, is it every 5,000 points that these power-ups appear? And then you're like, well, I just got him, and then nothing happened.
Yeah, so I missed shooting like everyone in this group because we thought like, yeah, maybe it was based on points, or like some games it's based on if you take out everyone in that wave that came at you. And as soon as you said that, I was like, nope, I missed everybody, and they still gave me power ups. So we're not quite sure. It's probably just random.
Yeah, so these either increase your speed or replenish your missile supply. So let's get into our next track. This is called Narrow Road, and it's from level 3. All right, that was from level 3, and the track was called Narrow Road, composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takenouchi, and Atsushi Fujio for Falsion on the Famicom Disk System. Mouthful though.
Yeah, this track was an earful. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. It was really cool, very well organized. It was kind of happy sounding almost. Like,
yeah, it was
like,
really,
everything's shooting at you and trying to kill you, but it's kind of like
really jazzy again. And that organ, I mean, sounded like an organ to me. It was like, it was incredible. It was crazy. It was just all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, and the scales that were going on, I mean, there was so, like, it was like each note didn't just like travel up. It like did like all these different scales all the way up. And I was like, man, this is kind of like listening to like Mariah Carey sing or something. It's just like it's so many notes. Yeah.
Yeah, this track is actually, it's really interesting. I was looking at this website. This is Japanese community for video game music listeners and stuff. And they have a poll for the top 100 Konami tracks of all time. And this track ranked 43. And I mean, that's of all time. And this track was the only track from Falsion that was on there. But a lot of people really, really like this track, and for good reason. It's an excellent, excellent track. It sounds like it's going to be kind of like this generic loop, and then it kind of travels as the time goes by. It travels into this crazy, orchestrated solo thing. I love it.
It definitely has a very satisfying build and kind of crescendo and all. I mean, it just was a really satisfying track.
There's kind of like a little walking bass. I want to say it's on the. Maybe it's the triangle. Maybe it's a square. Hold on. You want to listen to that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think... yeah, you hear that? Yeah. Dum, 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 dum. It's more straight notes than actually walking, but it's very predominant, like when you listen to that track. You heard that, right?
Yeah. No, and you can see that like this one is a little bit more support.
Famicom Disk System actually adds more of like a harmonizing high end. So it is like a secondary role. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I really love this track. I can see why it made it so far into the the top, broke the top 50.
And this is a big list too. I mean, there's tons of people that are going to the site. It got tons and tons of different ratings for it. So
well, I mean, Konami has such a great library of music. So narrowing it down to the top 100 would be really difficult. But anyway, so we were talking about this game and how you're kind of flying through in like 3D space. It has like that faux mode 7.
Right.
But one unique thing about this game is they actually took it a step further, and this game is on a very short list of games that had a Famicom Disk System 3D peripheral add-on.
Yes.
So this game, and they actually took it that step further to try to make it very three-dimensional.
Yeah, some of the games, so it's a very short list. Some of the games that are compatible with the 3D peripheral are Attack Animal Gakuen by Pony Canyon. There's Cosmic Epsilon by Asmic. Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally by Nintendo.
That's a nice title.
Yeah. Fuin Shorin Ken Ankoku no Mao by Jalico. Highway Star, or Rad Racer, as we know it here by Square. And there's also JJ Tobidase Daisakusen Part 2 by Square. And that's it.
Yeah, that's the whole list.
So, I mean, that for good reason, too. And none of these games were revered that well, right?
Right.
I mean,
like you would expect. This is not a commercially successful add-on. So it
in
didn't,
Japan.
Yeah.
It only came out in Japan.
Yeah, because the Famicom Disk System didn't come here. So
right.
But I mean, what it did was it had a pair of active shutter glasses and an adapter that connected the glasses to the third player port on the Famicom Disk System. So that's kind of how the glasses worked and how the attachment worked. And what this did was it allowed Falsion to display a stereoscopic image, which was very similar to the Sega Master System stereoscope 3D glasses. So same technology.
Right, and that was for Space Harrier 3D. They actually had their own little 3D thing. And I guess it plays a lot like this game. I'm sure it looks very similar in a sense.
That fake space moving forward.
Right.
So, like I said, it wasn't commercially successful. But what is interesting about this is Nintendo didn't give up. We know that there was the Virtual Boy. This was only 8 years later.
They never give up.
Yeah.
They're still making the same stuff.
Well, and it's great too because it eventually kind of paid off. So 8 years after they made this failure on the Famicom Disk System, they made the Virtual Boy. Which,
so they made another failure.
Yeah, which as we all know, it's that infamous system that just didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was not as successful as they wanted it to be.
It did 3D. I mean, it wasn't real 3D, but it made you feel like it was 3D. I liked it.
Oh yeah, it's still on very high on my list of systems to pick up, but not because it's like the greatest system ever made.
No.
So even after that commercial failure, they still did experimentation on the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance SP. It didn't come out. It was never released anywhere, and they said that a lot of that was due to cost and technical limitations. So we didn't see any add-ons for the GameCube and Game Boy Advance, but years later on the 3DS,
they finally
made it work.
got something that worked, and that seems like it was Nintendo's vision for so long. They probably started with these glasses, and they're like, you know what? all these games kind of suck, but I think we got something here. Let's just work on it for the next 20, 30 years and see what happens.
Yeah, and finally, I mean, it was
like one guy in a basement just working on
he's like,
3D.
I will not give up on 3D. And for the 3DS, it was cool. The first version of the 3DS, it was a neat thing. I didn't really like it that much.
I play mostly in 2D.
Right.
But there's some games that it worked really well in. I think I played, Zelda. I played all in 3D. That looked great.
Paper Mario Sticker Star looked good. A lot of the more flatter games looked kind of neat. But I mean, with the new 3DS, with the eye tracking technology, it worked a lot better. So I mean, it's kind of neat to see that all the way back in the 80s, they were working on a technology they didn't give up, and it's finally paid off. It's not the greatest thing about the 3DS, but it's it's a really cool feature.
It's kind of like how VR is going to turn out in 10 years from now. People are going to look back and be like, man, those idiots, didn't know what they were doing. PlayStation VR, come on.
Yeah.
Oculus.
Well, but if you look at back in the movies in the 80s, people were wearing virtual reality, playing games, and stuff like that. So maybe it's another thing that took 30 years to finally work.
Anyways, we have some more music to play. What do we got?
So next up, we have 2 tracks. The first track is called Careful with the Walls from level 4, and then we have Common Boss. You just heard the level 4 music titled Careful with the Walls and Common Boss for Falsion on the Famicom Disk System.
That first track, Careful with the Walls, what is it? That's from something.
Something sounds very familiar in that track. Like, I know that...
I was thinking Ai Senshi Nicol. I'm like, no, I know that soundtrack too well, but can't pinpoint it.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because for this game especially, you can really tell that Konami reused some samples and stuff like that, so it gives it like the sound of other games. But then for me, I was also like, well, I did listen to the soundtrack for like 8 hours on repeat while I was at work, so maybe this game is just reminding me of this game. But
no,
I mean,
the first time I heard it, I thought that too.
Yeah.
I was like, what do I know this from? Because you were saying, Konami recycle some of their sound samples and maybe some of their sound effects and stuff like that, but
even some of their melodies maybe too, or like kind of bits and pieces,
right? But they also have an amazing sound team, the Kohta Club. They've been, a lot of these guys have been with Konami for 20 some odd years, so they have a style and they kind of stick to that, and I think that kind of maybe comes out in a lot of different soundtracks. You might hear things that sound very familiar because it's one guy being like, hey, this is my melody here.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we've seen other composers for other companies sneak their little melodies in every game they've worked on.
Oh, the KK song. Yeah.
But I mean, so if any of you listeners are feeling kind of that same feeling, like a little bit of deja vu, and you kind of can, put your finger on which song this kind of sounds like, definitely shoot us a message online, and we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, we'll give you credit in the next show.
Yeah.
Anyways, the next track, Common Boss, it's really intense. I like this track. I think it's pretty cool. It's a little short. It loops pretty early, and then just kind of starts up again. It's like 30. I want to say it's like 30 seconds with a loop in there. Some of these bosses are pretty tough, but having this like really kind of raging sound is
No, I mean, like we've done 51 episodes and really focused in on music, and we're kind of noticing a little bit of a pattern with like the boss music that's kind of seems like a little bit of a short loop because you're not really going to be focusing a lot, so it's giving you that feeling of the intensity. And I've kind of been noticing that galloping kind of leads to make this like heroic sound, but then galloping with the kick pedal has like this menacing kind of boss music kind of sound to it.
That's a good observation. Yeah, no, I don't know how to describe it other than the like growling bass that the Disk System is doing for the sound there, but I really like that. It's like dun, 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 and I don't know, it's so cool. I think that's an excellent attachment, and then they have a little sweep in there too again. It's pretty rad.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely play the Common Boss song and tell that this is a boss music song. So.
Oh yeah, and we'll hear another boss track later on, but all the level music, it's kind of independent from what you're actually playing. It doesn't really matter. All the levels kind of look a little bit the same. We talked about the first one where it's kind of like that Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 Starfield simulator.
Yeah, it's like a couple pixels that are like kind of going off in different directions to give you the feeling that you're going towards them.
Yeah, but level 2 is a little bit different. You're kind of like flying over like a forest, and this feels a lot more like Space Harrier. It really looks like it. I mean, you get the horizon, a nice blue sky, and then about halfway through the level it fades to this sunset, and that gives you that I guess the perspective, because they have to have the horizon on there with the difference between the grass and the sky. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing some of the research for this, and they mentioned Space Harrier, and I was like, okay, and I saw some screenshots. I was like, I can kind of see it because you're moving away from the viewer in like a fake 3D. But then with that second level, I really was like, okay, I got it. Like Space Harrier did a really good job with their backgrounds that really gave that three-dimensional look. That first level has a very broken three-dimensional feel to it, but then that second level, it definitely starts to feel like, okay, I can see, just like on a racetrack. If the racetrack in a game where there was no like striping on the track, it would feel like you're not going anywhere. But once they start doing like the light stripe and the dark stripe, it really feels like you're moving. So that forest really gives you that feeling now that you're moving forward.
That last track that we played, that level 4, Careful with the Walls, that level is interesting because instead of having basically the sky and the ground, you're flying between two walls.
Right.
And this level is kind of crazy because there's missiles that shoot off the wall directly at you. You have to avoid that. And I don't know, there's something about this level that I just don't care for because I feel really like confined, but that's just a personal thing. I think it's not necessarily anything wrong with the level.
When I think too, it's you feel confined. You definitely, by looking at the screenshots, you would feel very confined, but I think it has like a false confinement because you're actually seeing things kind of move away from you in space, so they would kind of converge in on a vanishing point.
Oh, now you're making me dizzy, dude, just thinking about it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of those, like the green area, you can actually fly in front of, and you're not going to take any damage because it's actually further in front of you, but they just don't do a really good job of making it feel farther away.
Well, I mean, this is still an NES game, so what could they do with it, right? There's other levels too. There's one where you're got the same kind of horizon perspective, but you're flying over water, and then you get the sunset again. And then there's another level, which is the final level, and we'll play that track in a second here. But you're flying horizontally through.
So the walls are kind of above you and
below you. Yeah, it's the same weird green, purple kind of pattern. But I hated that level. I hated looking at it. I actually didn't make it that far. I watched the playthrough on that. The playthrough is funny. It's only like a 30-minute playthrough to like completely beat the game. But this last level takes like half of it. Yeah. Anyways, let's get into our next set of tracks. We have Flying High, which is from level 5, and then we have the final space fight from level 6, which is a fantastic track. I love this track so much, and I think you guys will too. You just heard Flying High from level 5 and the final space fight from level 6. And that was composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio.
Those are some really cool tracks. I really like them. The first one, Flying High, to me almost felt like a kind of like You Beat It cutscene track.
It's very triumphant, right?
Yeah,
I have to say that this is probably my least favorite track about, for the whole soundtrack. There's not a whole lot of songs, but this is... It's still a cool track, but it's just not, just didn't deliver for me. I think it was a little generic. Maybe it was the bass. I think the bass was like the whole way through.
It didn't seem to have that like great complexity that some of the other tracks had. But for me, the biggest thing that stood out is because we've been playing the tracks in order of levels. We've been going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this is level 5, and it's... the game's not over, and
you actually have more hard stuff ahead of you.
Yeah, but the track itself made it feel like, everything's good. Like you're kind of like riding off into that sunset, and everything's saved your human race or whatever, and so that kind of threw me off a little bit. I thought it was a very cool track though, but like you said, I think if I had to list my least favorite one of this soundtrack, it would be that. But I mean that. Being said, this is still a really amazing track.
Yeah, so for moving on from the least favorite, right over into my favorite track of the whole soundtrack, and that is the final area, and that's level 6. This track I love. I'm obsessed with this track, and I think because there's so many really interesting things that the composers are doing with the sound. From a technical standpoint, they're just doing some very interesting things, especially with the Famicom Disk System attachment. There's just really awesome audio. In fact, there's one. Let me show you real quick. It's something that they're doing. Let's see here. So I want you to listen really carefully because you'll hear it. I heard it right away, and I can't get it out of my head, but I want you to hear it too. Hang on. You hear that? All right, so hold on. Let's play it one more time. So that sound, if you look at the actual waveform, it's so interesting because it's like this really sudden low frequency positive voltage that it almost sounds like it's creating like distortion, right, above the DC offset, but that's all programmed in. And it's so rad to be able to hear that with the rest of the Nintendo APU sound hardware.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool when anything is like makes that attachment so much more special to this soundtrack.
Yeah, you know, this track is funny too. I did a little cover. If you look at our YouTube account, I did this like a cover of this track in Milky Tracker because I was like, you know, just for educational purposes, I was like, I wonder how this would look if it was written in a tracker. And so, you know, I kind of wrote it. It's not perfect, but I wrote it out to where I could at least see it kind of flow through and see how everything is. Now, I couldn't really create that same distortion sound, but I think the track sound turned out pretty good.
No,
right?
I really like it. It has some parts have a little bit of a different feel, but I really like it. You can definitely tell what track it came from. I mean, it blows me away.
Well, I hope you can at least tell what track it came from.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's not like a cover that's like totally
faithful,
different.
Yeah. But yeah, no, check it out. You can go to our YouTube account from on our website. There's the link to that. There. Yeah, it's like YouTube users Pixelated audio or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but for me with this track when it came on, I was just like, wow. Like with knowing that this last level is kind of like a 15-minute level, I was like, wow, I could definitely take this track for 15 minutes. And the other thing that was kind of interesting too was, you know, I had mentioned with the previous track Flying High for level 5 that I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't really see how it fits. It kind of feels funny, but it almost is like that calm before the storm because this track is just super intense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I mean, I would love to sit and try to listen and play this level for 15 minutes and hear that song, but I mean, I don't know. I might need to go on vacation after that. It's really intense.
There's that part where it's like almost like a piano playing up like a scale and then back down, but there's just enough echo on the other channel to produce like almost like this chaotic but like beautiful intertwined. Like I love that section as well. That I mean, I can't sing that, but you know where I'm going with it, right?
Yeah.
No, I really like that part. So we've talked about the levels a little bit. We've talked about how you get to a boss at the end of each one, just pretty much like any other game. But the bosses in this level or in this game are really cool looking. Actually, they look like these giant mechs from space. Right?
Yeah, they're all like really cool design. They all have very different shapes, and as you would
different
guess,
colors too.
Yeah, different colors, and as you would guess, they get bigger and kind of more menacing feeling as you go through. I mean, and more detail, and like because I'm noticing that the first boss is kind of like this little roundish, like green guy, and then it progresses, and then the last boss is just like very angular.
Well, the third boss looks like a sphere with like two big wings on it.
Yeah, or like an X-wing or whatever. I mean, it's
there you go.
It's really cool. I mean, and they're massive compared to your ship. I mean, they dwarf the size of your ship.
And the fifth boss, you know, that triumphant song that we were listening to earlier, the fifth boss looks like a giant ice cream cone.
A little bit. Yeah. Anyway, so I think this would be the perfect segue to play our next track, which is the last boss music.
Like we didn't have that planned out.
Yeah. All right, so you just survived the last boss music for Falsion on the Famicom Disk System.
Straight out of Contra.
Yeah.
Seriously, it gave me a Contra vibe.
Yeah, no, it was definitely what you would expect from a final boss fight. It was fast-paced, dangerous, menacing and had that galloping, kick pedal. So it kind of furthers that theory of, galloping kick pedal equals menacing. So
yeah, it was more in the lower range. I noticed in this track.
Yeah. So after we played this game, we kind of had some similar experiences to what we think. Or what we've read other people have had. Some people praise this game on how fluid the motion was, that the ship handles very well.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that about it. And they said that the 3D mode was a great experience. So if you got to try it out with the 3D goggles, I would assume that some people would like it. But then, as you would also assume, some people wouldn't like it.
Right.
We had problems with some of the depth perception. It was a little funky, not terrible. Right. It didn't make you hate the game. It was a fun game, and even if you died, you kind of felt like it was your fault. So you kind of wanted to keep going and do better.
Well, we kept playing it like, let me get a run at it. Yeah, back and forth. That was pretty cool. I do want to mention though, like for you, if you want to play the game and you're thinking to yourself, I don't have the 3D glasses, this is going to be all weird. There's actually an option where you can choose normal mode. You can choose 3D is by default, and then this is on the title screen, and then you can choose normal mode, and that makes everything basically like you're just playing a Famicom Disk System game or an NES game at that point.
Yeah, and that's always really nice. And everyone kind of agreed the soundtrack for this game is amazing, and a lot of people said that out of the 7 or 8 3D compatible games that were released, that this was the best one.
Well, didn't have a whole lot of competition, but yeah, this game is kind of cool.
I don't know, that Nintendo racing one could have been pretty cool. A 3D racing game could have been kind of neat. But you know how I love racing games.
It could have been really horrible, like
completely ruin your eyes. But another neat thing that I wanted to bring up before I forget is actually the ship from this game was recycled for Gradius Gaiden. So that's kind of neat that the ship gets to carry on into a whole new game.
Yeah, it's just them recycling again and bringing it. They're probably, the game wasn't received very well and not a lot of people played it. So they're probably thinking like, maybe we'll bring this back. There were some people that liked it and maybe we'll continue the legacy a little bit.
Right.
Sneak it in there.
Yeah, it could also be, not a lot of people played this game, so they have no idea that this ship existed in a whole nother game. But
right. People did receive the soundtrack really well. People loved it for that, in fact. And I mean, we're doing a whole episode on it because the soundtrack is so good. It was released actually as part of a collection in 1990 called Konami NES Music Memorial Best Volume 2. And it was about 1,500 yen, which is like $15. And it had all the tracks from 3 different games. It was Twin B3, Exciting Soccer, and Falsion. And those were all composed by Atsushi Fujio. And what's really cool is that in 2014, very recently, Egg Music produced Falsium's soundtracks. And this was like $8, and it had all the tracks from the game, but it was rearranged by Atsushi Fujio again. So like people loved this music, and they kept doing these little kind of re-releases for it, or 2 re-releases for it. I think that's totally awesome. And another thing, too, I want to bring up before I forget, is that 3 of the tracks in Falsium actually appear in some of the Poppin' Music games.
Oh,
so
nice.
those arcade games where you mash on the buttons like rhythm games, they appear in that. So people obviously like it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, any song that comes into those games is a song that people must really like, or a song that would translate really well to some type of interactive play.
Right, and maybe we'll hear one in a minute.
Yeah.
Anyways, what do we got next? We have another track, right?
Right. So next up we have Farewell to Journey, which is the ending.
And there's your triumphant track, James.
Yeah.
That was Farewell to Journey, which is the ending track composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio for Falsion.
Well, I didn't think it started very triumphant. I thought it kind of sounded like
out of key,
like you failed, like you're dead, or kind of like when we did that Sonic episode. There was you could beat the game, but it was a very horrible victory. Like everyone dies, but you. And then there's like the perfect victory, which you beat, Dr. Robotnik and you save the island. So
right.
I thought it was cool though. I liked how it kind of misled you at the beginning and then kind of really picked up, and you were like, yeah, this is great. I did it.
I felt exactly the same. I mean, this track is like ending kind of credits stuff, even though it's, I don't know, it didn't really do anything out of the box. It didn't do anything that fun. The melody wasn't that catchy or anything.
It's a little it was a little generic, I thought.
They almost could have just used the level 5 music and played it again, and I would have been fine with it,
Yeah.
But no, the game was cool.
Yeah.
And that's the end.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't get a chance to watch all the way through the playthrough, and you did. So
yeah, I took a little screenshot for you so you could see this.
Yeah, so just like in Ai Senshi Nicol, Konami has a note at the end of the game, and for this one, it's just
right.
It's kind of weird because at least with Ai Senshi Nicol, they gave you kind of what was going on. And this one, It says, in the 22nd century, the world's biggest crisis was eased by Falsion. And you're like, what? Like, that's what I was doing? Like I didn't even know what I was doing. I just thought it was a ship kind of like shooting stuff. And then
I had no idea what I saw. This was like, wait a minute. Like,
yeah.
What is why?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you didn't read the manual, which as a kid, I never read the manual.
No.
I would never know what was going on. So then you see this clip at the end. It's like, you didn't give me any story in the beginning, and now you want to give me all the story? And so the text goes on to say, but while enjoying the victory and the peace, disquieting explosions of planets happened one after another across the outer space. It might be the second gigaton. I can't even say that name. Gigantos. I don't know. Gigantos.
What is that from?
That's what they're called, I guess.
Oh, really?
That's what the aliens are called.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then so it's like
I don't remember that from.
So it's funny, like, so they let you know what you were doing, and then it's like, while everyone was enjoying it, planets are blowing up and people are dying, and it might be this basically the second coming of these aliens, and then it says nobody knows it though, and it's like. So are you hinting at a sequel, or are you just saying like, well, like you won, but the universe is destroyed anyways?
I think there is a little bit of like a level of comedy in the game, because between levels there's this kind of little dialogue that the Falsion, the main character or the main ship, I don't know, it says on the screen. It's printed and it'll be like, and it's in English. Granted, this game was Japan only, but it'll say like, after that, I needed a cup of coffee or something. It was like, it's really weird. Like some of the English or English doesn't really make any sense, but I could see them trying to be a little lighthearted with it. So maybe with this, it was just like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, and one thing I was thinking too is that even before I read this odd ending, I was thinking, well, okay, so all these ships were sent in this hyperdrive zone thing, and I would assume it's kind of like a light speed, like let me warp you to the edge of the galaxy. And he was the only one survived. So then I'm thinking, all right, he survived. How is he going to get back? It sounds like they definitely thought a very dark ending. It sounds like the universe ends up still being destroyed by a second coming of these aliens, but it's like no one knew how everyone died, I guess. So.
Oh my God, Konami.
Yeah.
Oh, 80s Konami.
Yeah.
I miss you.
I really like. Yeah, I missed it too.
I miss you guys. Anyways, today we covered Falsion on the Famicom Disk System. It's about time. We've been talking about doing this game for so long, and we've been avoiding playing any tracks and expansion packs because we really wanted to cover it in its entirety. Anyways, the game was composed by Shinya Sakamoto, Shigehiro Takanouchi, and Atsushi Fujio, and it was an absolutely amazing soundtrack. I hope you guys liked it. Yeah, no, and if you want to know more about the show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for show notes and track lists, and let us know how you like the soundtrack on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Pixelated Audio. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of feedback from you guys listening, and we really appreciate it. Every time we get something, it just brightens up our day. It means a lot to us. Please leave a review on iTunes. That means something to us too. We always read that. We always try to gauge our show and change it up accordingly. So thank you guys, and appreciate anything you got. Oh, and if you're new to our show, you can check out some of our last episodes. We just did one on an expansion pack, which was
our episode 50, so it was
our
a big
50th
landmark
one.
for us.
Yeah, a lot of really awesome music. James surprised me a few times, and I think I shocked him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the track taking us out, earlier I was saying, like, you know, the Falsion music made its way into the pop and music soundtracks for those arcade games. And so
yeah, I think you subtly hinted at it.
Yeah, I found this track from the game, and you haven't heard it yet. So
right.
You're going to actually listen to it with our listeners at the same time, for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The First Space Fight from Falsion. That's the title. And it is arranged or remixed by Kohta Takahashi. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in a few weeks for the next episode.